And now we are at the section Worship of Trees. If, as might be said, man's first ideal was the life of the tree, naturally his worship would be that of the tree. And in many countries, trees were held in the utmost reverence, which, in some cases, has survived down to the present day. Modern research has thrown much new light on the mythological origin of tree gods and tree spirits, more particularly as regards the mythology of ancient Greece. Professor Rendell Harris marks that the gods of Olympos are fading away into the earlier forms from which they were evolved. The most primitive and simple of religious beliefs among both northern and southern races connected the object with the divinity, and when the ancients declared the oak sacred to Zeus, they identified the tree with the god. In other words, the tree itself was the god, and in very primitive times was worshipped as such. This hypothesis is still further elaborated by the fact that the oak is the tree which most often struck by lightning, and thus Zeus, being also the god of thunder, or the thunder itself, dwelt in, or rather had his being in, an oak tree. Professor Harris puts it thus. The thunder god goes back into the thunder man, or the thunder bird, or thunder tree. Zeus takes the stately form and vegetable life of the oak tree. Or, if he must be flesh and blood, he comes back as a red-headed woodpecker. The parasites of the oak, such as mistletoe and ivy, would evidently partake of the attributes of the tree, and would thus be the thunder also. In the case of the ivy, a new and subordinate thunder god would become evolved under the name of Dionysus. And Professor Harris says Dionysus is the ivy. In the first instance, he is ivy, nothing more or less. And again, the tree is the thunder, and makes all its parasites and its denizens thunder also. The god of thunder among the Finns was Ukko, or oak, and the mountain ash or rowan, under the name of Rani, was considered to be his wife. The red berries of this tree were very sacred, and apparently it was on account of them that the tree derived its sanctity, as the following passage from the Kalevala would indicate. In the yard that grows a rowan, thou with reverend care shouldst tend it. Holy is the tree there growing, holy likewise are its branches. On its boughs the leaves are holy, and its berries yet more holy. From the redness of its berries it was known as Thor's tree. When Christianity began to take a hold on the nations, the priests endeavored to do away with this ancient worship of trees, looking upon it as a diabolical invention. It was, however, so deeply ingrained in the human heart that in many cases it was utilized by the church for its own ends. By blessing the most ancient and venerated trees, and by erecting Christian altars and placing crucifixes and images of the Virgin near to those trees, under which, in ancient times, the people had sacrificed to the heathen divinities. It is related of St. Martin that he once demolished a temple unopposed, but when he endeavored to cut down a sacred fir tree near it, the people prevented him. Round the cross itself, a legend was woven by which it was recognized to have been formed from a tree lineally descended from the tree of Adam. Among the Jews, tree worship appears to have been pretty widespread at one time. The Asherah, to which frequent reference is made in the Old Testament, was often simply a grove, but frequently it was an image such as an artificial tree, and as such is often seen as Assyrian inscriptions or sculptures, tree worship having been very common in Assyria. The worship of the Asherah seems to have been entirely local, and the prophets protested vehemently against it. At Temnos, Aphrodite was worshipped in the shape of a growing myrtle tree, which might be considered as an image. Dr. James Ferguson mentions a curious instance of tree worship in India, which he had witnessed himself. He says, while residing in Thassur, I observed at one time considerable crowds passing near the factory I then had charge of. As it might be merely an ordinary affair they were going to attend, I took no notice. But as the crowd grew daily larger and assumed a more religious character, I inquired and was told that a god had appeared in a tree at a place about 6 miles off. Next morning, I rode over and found a large space cleared in a village I knew well, in the center of which stood an old decayed date tree, hung with garlands and offerings. Around it, houses were erected for the attendant Brahmins, and a great deal of business was going on in offerings and puja. On my inquiring how the god manifested his presence, I was informed that soon after the sun rose in the morning, the tree raised its head to welcome him, and bowed it down again when he departed. As this was a miracle easily tested, I returned at noon and found it was so. I just lost my spot. I was trying to shoo away a little hornet that was after me, but I found my spot again, so here I go. After a little study and investigation, the mystery did not seem difficult of explanation. The tree had originally grown across the principal pathway through the village, but at last hung so low that in order to enable people to pass under it, it had been turned aside and fastened parallel to the road. In the operation, the bundle of fibers which composed the root had become twisted like the strands of a rope. When the morning sun struck on the upper surface of these, they contracted in drying, and hence a tendency to untwist, which raised the head of the tree. With the evening dews they relaxed, and the head of the tree declined, thus proving to the man of science, as to the credulous Hindu, that it was due to the direct action of the sun god. The mysterious processes connected with the life and growth of trees, from the tiny seedlings developing in the course of centuries into the hoary giants of the forests, led primitive man to believe these trees with all kinds of supernatural beings, and even, as already said, to endow them with separate souls of their own. And this belief, with various modifications, was found in all countries. In many parts of the Egyptian desert, and at a considerable distance from the Nile, may be seen sycamore fig trees, Ficus sycamoris, of luxuriant growth, green and flourishing among the sand. The truth is that the water of the river has infiltrated through to them, and it may be said that they stand with their feet on the river, though apparently far removed from it. These trees are considered to be divine and to be animated by the goddesses within them. These goddesses or spirits sometimes manifest themselves, and Professor Maspero says that at such times the head or even the whole body would emerge from the trunk of the tree, after a time re-entering it, being reabsorbed, or as the Egyptian expression has it, the trunk ate it again. The chief goddesses who dwelt in these trees were Hathor, Naut, Selkut, and Nit, as well as other less important divinities. These thus shrouded their divinity in trees, and so became tree goddesses. Many of these trees yield a fluid which in some instances is limpid and in others milk-like. It was thus believed that these divinities provided nourishment and refreshment for their devotees on earth, and many of the ancient Egyptian monuments depict the goddess as bending over the earth, pouring out the water of the Nile from a vase, which represents the annual inundation, and milk issuing from one of her breasts. The sycamore fig is one of those trees which produces a milky fluid. It was from it, in this case clearly a mythical tree, that the goddess provided sustenance for man. The ancient Egyptians believed that the souls of the dead had a long and arduous journey before they reached the islands of the blessed. The Book of the Dead gave them full instructions, which, if they obeyed them to the letter, enabled them to reach the goal without fail. Professor Maspero, describing the journey of the soul, says, "On leaving the tomb, he turned his back on the valley, and staff in hand climbed the hills which bounded it on the west, plunging boldly into the desert, where some bird, or even a kindly insect, such as a praying mantis, a grasshopper, or a butterfly, served as his guide. Soon he came to one of the sycamores which grow in the sand far away from the Nile, and are accounted magic trees by the fellahin. Out of the foliage a goddess, Nuit, Hathor, or Nit, half emerged and offered him a dish of fruit, loaves of bread, and jar of water. By accepting these gifts, he becomes the guest of the goddess and could never more retrace his steps without special permission. Beyond the sycamore were lands of terror, infested by serpents and ferocious beasts, intersected by ponds and marshes where gigantic monkeys cast their nets. Having successfully eluded all these and other perils, he at last reached the islands of the blessed, where perpetual bliss was his lot. In some instances, the original form of the tree spirit was the actual tree, and this may have been the idea of the Karak Indians of California. Mr. S. Powers mentions that when an Indian has occasion to cut branches from off a sacred tree, he takes care to leave the topmost branches and 2 side branches, causing them to resemble a man's head with 2 outstretched arms. He is usually in great distress when cutting the wood and weeps copiously, but cannot say for what reason, unless it be that by his grief he hopes to mitigate the wrath of the spirit of those of whose branches he has cut off. The god of vegetation under the different name of Adonis. The god of vegetation under the different name of Adonis in Syria, Attis in Phrygia, and Osiris in Egypt was considered to be a tree spirit, and as such was charged with the duty of watching over the crops, stimulating their growth, and averting all evil influences from them until they attained to maturity. The mythological conceptions of this god under these 3 names are embodied in the legend which narrates how the god is destroyed by the boar or the bear of winter and is resurrected with the breath of spring. In the very early days of Egypt, Osiris was undoubtedly a tree spirit, and, as the legend says, his dead body was enclosed in a tree. Many of the ancient Egyptian monuments, particularly some in the Hall of Osiris at Dendera, depict it so. Dr. J.G. Fraser mentions a ceremony showing Osiris in this character as described by Firmicus Maternus, De Aurora Profanarum Religionum. This states that a pine tree was cut down and the center hollowed out. An image of Osiris was made from this wood, which was then buried like a corpse in the hollow of the tree. Dr. Fraser observes that it is hard to imagine how the conception of a tree as tenanted by a personal being could be more plainly expressed, and adds that this image was kept for a year and then burned, as was similarly done in Phrygia, with an image of Attis attached to a pine tree. I'm going to show you this word. At Gerbalge in Dalmatia, spirits inhabited only certain particular trees, and if one of these trees were felled, the perpetrator of the deed either died on the spot or became an invalid for the rest of his life. There was a plane tree at Bithynia, which was said to have grown from the tomb of Amycus, and his spirit had entered into it. He is said to have been one who fought with all strangers, and it was believed that if any part of this tree was such as a bough, was taken on board a ship, constant quarreling ensued until his malign influence was got rid of by throwing the branch away. This bears a close resemblance to the legend of the piece of oak from the grove of Dodona, placed by Minerva in the prow of the Argo. A similar tale is mentioned by Mr. W.R.S. Ralston. He says there is a Czech story of a nymph who appeared by day among men, but always went back to her willow by night. She married a mortal, bore him children, and lived happily with him, till at length he cut down her willow tree. That moment his wife died. Out of the willow was made a cradle, which had the power of instantly lulling to sleep the babe she had left behind her. And when the babe became a child, it was able to hold converse with its dead mother by means of a pipe cut from the twigs grown on the stump which had once been that mother's home. In Croatia, witches were formerly buried under old trees in the forest, and it was believed that their souls passed into these trees. In some districts of Austria, forest trees are said to have souls and to feel injuries done to them. Up to little over a century ago, the Estonians reverenced certain holy trees in the island of Dago, and under them sacrifices were offered on St. George's Day for the well-being of their horses. No one ventured to break a bough, and even the fallen boughs were left to decay on the ground. Among the Samoyedas of Siberia, any curiously contorted tree was adopted as an idol and worshipped as containing a divinity. Throughout Africa, the belief in spirits is universal. In Nigeria, many trees are said to be inhabited by the spirits of the dead, and Mr. C.H. Partridge says that in every village of the Ndem tribe, there is a large tree into which the souls of the villagers enter at death. These trees are held to be sacred and are not cut down. Mr. Partridge also mentions that this big tree is considered by the natives of other villages to be their life, and if anyone injures it, he will become ill, or may even die, unless he pays a fine to the chief. Some Abyssinian tribes believe that a tree groans while it is being felled, implying that a curse will rest upon the woodman. Consequently, he endeavors to explain to the tree that it was not he, but an elephant or a rhinoceros which caused it to fall. Sometimes the tree is considered to be the god himself, as for instance the tree Walichu. In the religious system of Dahomey, the second most important gods, the first being serpents, are considered to be tall and beautiful trees, the most revered of these being the cotton tree and the poison tree. Prayers are offered up to those trees, especially in times of sickness, and offerings are made to them. The cotton tree is also referred to as Bombax. The Aboriginal races of India, the Kolarians and the Dravidians, worshipped spirits, particularly the spirits of their ancestors and demons. Each family had its tutelary spirit, and these were supposed to dwell in very large and ancient trees. On the outskirts of almost every village may be seen a gigantic tree which is regarded not only as a temple or shrine, but as the center of the village life as far as its widespread shade extends. Sacrifices are offered to the resident spirits of these trees, and votive offerings are hung on the branches. These trees appear to have been a survival of the ancient practice of the Kolarians of leaving one solitary tree standing as a refuge for the dispossessed spirits when clearings were made in the jungle. Mr. W. W. Hunter tells us that the whole of the inhabitants of the capital of Birboom go once a year to a certain shrine in the jungle where a ghost dwells in a bela tree. The shrine consists of 3 trees, the bela tree, a kachmula tree, and a sara tree. Mr. Hunter adds that, though these trees are only about 70 years old, the shrine is said to be of the greatest antiquity. And tradition alleges that the 3 trees never grow thicker or taller, but remain the same forever. In the northwest of India, the chili tree, Juniperus excelsa, was the abode of a tree spirit who caused women to bear children and flocks and herds to multiply. It is believed among the Tibetans that whenever a lama is born, all withered trees and other plants surrounding his birthplace put forth green leaves, this being the sign that a holy child is born. Minher J.J.M. de Groot, in his work on the religious system of China, says that in China the tree spirits are usually shaped like human beings or appear in the likeness of bulls, serpents, or other creatures. He tells how sometimes when a tree is being felled, the tree spirit has been seen to rush out in the semblance of a blue bull, and adds that even yet the Chinese belief in dangerous tree spirits is very strong. In southern Fujian, people are deterred from felling large trees or cutting off heavy branches, lest the spirit of the tree become angry and cause disease and other calamities. The green banyan, or qing, which is the largest tree found in that district of China, is particularly respected. In Amoy, there is a strong aversion to planting trees, because it is thought that as soon as the stems are as thick as a man's neck, the planter will probably be throttled by the indwelling spirit. Menher de Groot thinks that this may account for the almost total neglect of forestry in that part of China. Some of the tribes of Borneo, in common with other races when they are making clearings in the forest, leave a few trees standing so that the ejected spirits may have some places in which they can take refuge. The Dayaks will never cut down an old tree, as they attribute souls to the tree. And in like manner, the Buddhists of Siam refuse to break even the branch of a tree, as they believe that everything possesses a soul. And Tassim tree, Antiaris toxicaria, of central Borneo, is believed to possess a soul. There is the poison tree, this is the poison tree with the juice of which arrows are poisoned. Its spirit is very fractious, but if suitable offerings are made to it, it shows its pleasure by endowing the wood with a particularly pleasant perfume. In many countries, trees are supposed to utter cries of pain and even to bleed when they are cut down or wounded in any way, and in some cases, the chief of the tribe and his family die as the result of such a sacrilege. William Ellis relates how a great gambler, Kanekama, by name, had, in the reign of Kamarau, a king of ancient days, staked and lost all he possessed, except one pig, which, being dedicated to his god, he durst on no account stake. That night he dreamed that his god appeared to him and told him to stake his pig next day, when he would be successful. He did so and dedicated a great part of his gains to his god. That night in his dreams the god appeared again to him and told him to tell the king that a clump of trees would be found growing in a particular spot, and that if he cut down one of them and made an image of it, he, the god, would reside in the image and impart his power to it, and that Kanekama should be his priest. The king, hearing of this, sent a number of men to cut down one of the trees of the clump, which clump had been miraculously caused by the gods to grow up in a single night, and into which they entered. The gods gave a sign which tree was to be cut down. When the men were working with their stone axes, chips of wood, striking one or two of them, killed them instantly. This terrified the others, and they ceased to work. Kanekama, however, persuaded them to resume their labors, which they did, first covering themselves with native cloth and the leaves of the Thai plant, and instead of axes they used their long daggers, or pahoas, with which they also carved out the image. From that circumstance, the idol obtained the name of Karai Pahoa, meaning dagger cut or carved. The carving was very curious. The arms of the idol were extended with the fingers spread out, the head was covered with human hair, and the large mouth was armed with rows of shark's teeth. The wood of the tree was very poisonous, and it was said that anyone drinking water in which the wood had been steeped would die within 24 hours. Among many nations, not only are trees said to possess souls of their own, but the souls of the dead are believed to take refuge in trees, and so become tree spirits. Mr. H. Ward tells us that on the river Congo it is believed by some of the tribes that a sick man's soul, having left his body, wanders aimlessly about, and it is necessary to capture it and restore it to its owner. This is done by the witch doctor who, after various incantations, announces that he has succeeded in charming the soul into a branch of a tree. This branch is then broken off and conveyed to the side of the sick man, who is placed in an upright position beside it. After further incantations have been performed, the body is then believed to have re-entered its owner's body. A variation of this belief is found in Melanesia, where the spirits or ghosts of ancestors are supposed to be the cause of illnesses, and various methods are adopted to drive them back to their graves, a vicarious sacrifice often being made. Mr. R.H. Codrington mentions that in the island of San Cristobal, this sacrifice takes the shape of a pig or a fish. The natives believe that a malignant demon called Tapia has taken a sick man's soul and imprisoned it within a banyan tree. So some person who is on confidential terms with Tapia offers a pig or a fish to him, saying, "This is for you to eat in place of that man. Eat this, don't kill him." Tapia accepts the offering, releases the soul, and the man recovers. Other similar cases are found in the island of Amboina and the Babar Islands, where a branch of a tree or even a leaf may be the recipient of a man's soul which had been taken by demons, and which, by various incantations, may be restored to its owner. Demons often reside in trees, and in the Roman Catholic countries of Europe, small crucifixes or images of the Virgin Mary may frequently be seen in the forests, either placed on the trunks or suspended from the branches of the trees. Professor de Gubernatis says that these images are thought to drive away from the tree the demons which hide under the bark, but that nevertheless it is to the tree itself which is given sanctity and adoration. Behind them still lies the holy horror, which Lucian breathed in the forests of ancient Gaul, and the demons which are driven away are the ancient gods, the old forces of nature. In Chaldea, evil spirits or genii were much dreaded, especially during the night when the belated traveler was liable to have one pounce out upon him from a hedge or from behind a tree. The gods of Chaldea often inhabited trees among other objects, the tree of Eridu, which pronounced oracles, being one. In a Chaldean legend, the meaning of which is still obscure, is depicted on an intaglio. The scene shows a goddess pursued by a demon with a double face, taking refuge under a tree. The tree bends down as if to protect her, and while the demon is endeavoring to break down the tree, a god comes out from the trunk and hands a stone-headed mace to the goddess with which to protect herself against her foe. Even at the present day in Palestine, the carob tree and the fig tree, or sycamore fig, are believed to be inhabited by devils. The former in particular, as the reddish color of its wood suggests blood. The tamarisk tree, on the other hand, is usually considered to be inhabited by a saint, or wele. I'll show you that word, wele. The worship of ancestors is very widespread in some countries, trees or animals being considered as the residences of the ancestral spirits. Thus, several of the tribes of Central Australia believe that the human soul passes through endless reincarnations, and that men and women are simply their own ancestors reborn. Between each incarnation, the soul exists in some natural object, in many cases in a tree. In South Australia, the tribe of Dayeri consider some large sacred trees to be transformations of their fathers, and hence they take the utmost care of these trees. In the Philippine Islands, the natives refrain from felling certain large and stately trees, which they consider to be the homes of the spirits of their ancestors. The spirit speaks in the rustling of the leaves, and anyone passing such a tree begs pardon of the spirit for disturbing it. Each village of the Ignorotas in the district of Lepanto has a sacred tree in which the ancestral spirits live, and offerings are made to it. If it is injured, some misfortune falls on the village, but if it were unfortunately cut down, the whole village would perish. In Bontoc, a province of Luzon, large trees are left standing in which the ancestral spirits reside, and these spirits are further honored by food being placed under the trees for their use. The natives of the northwest coast of Papua think that the spirits or souls of their ancestors live in the branches of trees. On these they hang strips of white or red cloth, 7 or a multiple of 7 in number, and also baskets of food as offerings to the spirits. Mrs. Bishop tells that in Korea, the souls of women who die in childbed take up their abode in trees. From time immemorial, the Chinese have planted trees, particularly the cypress and the pine, on graves in order to strengthen the souls of the deceased and save the body from decay. These special trees are considered fuller of vitality than others, are consequently often identified with the spirits of the dead. A sacred tree stands on the entrance of every Mayokia village, and in this tree is believed to reside the soul of the first ancestor of the villagers, which presides over their destinies. We are at page 173, and it is about to start pouring rain. It is a beautiful day, though, and I am shaded under a tree, so yeah, these stories are great. What a beautiful day. I will make another video soon.